Another point. The King of England put his own claimants, someone loyal to himself, on the throne of Scotland, apparently as a prelude to annexing the country or gaining control of it. The Scottish did not want this person. They wanted their own claimant, their own heir to the throne, known as Robert the Bruce. So he took over. Robert the Bruce seized the throne with the support of the Scottish people. And then the English came in and tried to upset the cart, tried to reinstall their own pretender to the throne. And they had the support of the Pope, or the Pope intervened in order to make peace, but he was weighing more towards the English side, possibly because the English were more important or had more influence. And the barons wrote a letter to him called the Declaration of Arbroath. We should remember that at that time everyone belonged, or everyone in the west of Europe belonged to the Roman Catholic Church. All Catholics, all believed that the Pope was the head of the church. And they all endeavored to abide by his judgments, and he was the ultimate religious authority, one could say. Also had very great spiritual and practical political influence on what was going on. So they wrote in this letter, known as the Declaration of Arbroath. And in this letter, they describe how they came to Scotland, that originally they had gone to Spain and lived amongst barbarous peoples, that they had travelled through the Mediterranean, gone to Spain, come through the Mediterranean, gone to Spain. In Spain, they had suffered at the head of barbarians and savage peoples. And then they had left. And they had come to Scotland. And they had driven out the peoples they found in those areas and lived in their places. And they were attacked by other peoples, by Norwegians, by Danes, that is Scandinavian Vikings, and by the English. But nevertheless, they managed to take possession of the area. And they had held it free of all servitude ever since. And they have an unbroken lineage of rulers, and it belongs to them. And they wanted, and they lived in the past in freedom and peace, and they, until the King of England, Edward, had tried to unset the apple cart and disturb matters through deeds of cruelty, massacre, violence, pillage, arson, imprisoning prelates, burning down monasteries, robbing and killing monks and nuns, and other outrages without number which he committed against our people, etc. He had been a very bad person and done horrible things, and they wanted to be free of his onslaughts. And God had protected them and enabled them to put Robert the Bruce on the throne, and he should remain on the throne. Like another Judas the Maccabee, they said, Judas the Maccabee, who delivered the Jews from the Hellenist Syrians in the 2nd century BCE, or like Joshua, who had conquered the land of Canaan. And that their laws and customs and enable them to make Robert the Bruce the king. And that they are bound to him by his right and by the merits of their freedom. It still be maintained that with him come what may, they means to stand. And so on, and they in effect read between the lines, or also here and there saying expressly they want to be ruled by someone who represents them, who comes of them, and who is a legitimate ruler according to them, according to their general accepted consensus and that if His Holiness the Pope would be so good as to help them in this, then he too would benefit from it, and so would all of Christendom. And if the Pope does not agree with this, then they will continue to resist the English machinations. And that is the Declaration of Arbroath. And this was very early, 1320, before the idea of democracy and everything we have, and rulership of the people and everything else, everything that we now take for granted was not accepted at that time. At that time, kings with kings with rights of their own, with overriding rights, ruled in an autocratic way. Here the people of Scotland are declaring that they want a king of their own, a king who represents them. The independence of Scotland was a prerogative of the Scottish people. It belonged to them and was them to give to whomsoever they wanted. It was not the king's to take without their assent. They had a right to independence and national sovereignty. And the principles of democracy are referred to. It also, if you read between the lines, what they are saying is consistent with them having been of Israelite descent, that they had been with the Israelites when they came out of Egypt, that they had travelled through the Mediterranean and come to Spain and lived there many centuries until, due to oppression, they had moved out and come to Scotland. So that is the declaration. The scholars and academics have seen in this declaration the initial principles that gave rise to the American Revolution, the principles of responsible representation of the American Constitution, the early principles of democracy that came to fruition. The American Revolution of 1776 that gave rise to the USA, as seen in the many presidents and leading figures in the USA in the formation of American thought who came from Scotland, who grew up in these traditions. So this is a characteristic of the Scottish that gave its expression to the USA. And it's hinted at in the Bible. The Bible itself speaks of this. The Declaration of Arbroath is not just a show of words, but something real and of actual importance to the Scottish people. It reflected actual Scottish sentiment. Voltaire, the French revolutionary thought thinker, died in 1778. He was a defender of civil liberties. He said, "We look to Scotland for all our ideas of civilizations." Scottish thought, Scottish constitutional thought, Scottish political thought, Scottish social appreciation of reality influenced all of Europe, and it influenced the USA. So we say that Manasseh became a representative. Manasseh came to be represented in the USA because the names of tribes in Britain and Europe and Ireland who mainly moved to North America, those are clans from Manasseh. So we show elsewhere. The name America is derived from the word ha-Machiri, meaning descendants of Machir. The word America comes from ha-Machiri, which in Hebrew means descendants of Machir. Machir was the firstborn son of Manasseh, and that is where the word America Vespucci gave its name to America. From America Vespucci, an Italian sailor and Italian navigator, we received the name America given to America. But he received his name from a local hero in his area, in southern France, northern Italy, who was of Jewish descent, and he was known as Mechir or HaMechiri. And in Latin, medieval Latin of the time, they wrote it as America, because these Hebrew words, Mechir, HaMechiri, are difficult on the European tongue. So they wrote it down, transmitted it as Mechir, translated it as America, America, and that is where the name America came from. So indirectly, America is named after Mechir. Also, the name Manasseh in Hebrew means responsible representation. That is the name of the name Manasseh, son of Joseph. His name Manasseh means responsible representation in the Hebrew, which reflects the national character of America. Manasseh was to become great after Ephraim. See Genesis 48:19. He too will be great. And also rabbinical commentators. And in America was preceded by Great Britain. Great Britain ruled over a quarter of the world, 1/5 of its population, or more. And where it didn't rule, it also dominated. It's the greatest empire ever known on the earth, and it ruled for a long time. And after that, it was succeeded by the USA, who overlapped with it, and still is continuing its policies and continuing to dominate where it was. Even so, the prosperity of Manasseh was to exceed that of Ephraim, as indicated in the Bible, as Rabbi Naphtali Zvi Yehuda Berlin, died 1893, understands the Bible to indicate. Also, we have Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, 19th century. He explains the Hebrew meaning of the name Manasseh, connotes in Hebrew responsible representation. The Manasseh word Manasseh in Hebrew, it comes from the root Nashe. Manasseh is a verbal noun form derived from the root verb Nashe, meaning to forget, to misplace. And we find it in the following usages. Noshe is a creditor, someone who gives you money, but he doesn't let it go. He maintains a connection with it. He maintains a claim on it. Noshe. Also, Nashim, the word for women in the Hebrew is not ishot as it should be, but Nashim, denoting the women in the aggregate as a collectivity. They turn their affairs over to men, usually, that the men should run the show, but still be responsible for them and to them. That's why they're called Noshim. Also the word Nashia, denoting forgetfulness. What is forgetfulness? You know something, but it slips your mind. It's still there, somewhere in your subconscious. It is there, but it is moved. It has slipped your mind, but you're still connected to it. And all of these names put together connote Manasseh, meaning trusting in God and putting whatever has been or done to you, as happened to Joseph, putting it aside but remaining aware of it. That is why the name Manasseh was given to Manasseh. And indirectly it represents responsible representation, having somebody represent you, but being responsible to you. That is the principle of Manasseh, and that is what we find in Scotland and later in the USA, coming into expression. Apart from that, we have other tribes in Scotland, other indications. Many Scots and Irishmen are red-haired. In Ireland, it's a little bit greater than in Scotland, but in Scotland, it is more spread. In other words, a greater proportion of the population has the potential to produce red hair. But the figures are similar, 10% here, 12 to 15% there. Both Scotland and Irishmen are often red-haired, relatively speaking. This was given in the Midrash is characteristic of the tribes of Levi and Simeon. Also, the Bible says that King David of Judah was also red-haired. See 1 Samuel 15:12, 1 Samuel 17:42. In the Hebrew and translations to the Hebrew, see the commentaries on that King David was red-haired. And King David was from the tribe of Judah, the father of the Italian astronomer Galileo died 1642, and he wrote that the Irish love the harp. The harp is the favorite instrument of the Irish because they believe they are descendant from King David. So here too we have a reference to the tradition or the concept. Maybe they are connected to Israel because they find elements from the tribes of Asher and Dan. There's a lot of tribes of Asher and Dan in Ireland and also in Scotland. And also descendants from Jews were also to be found in Scotland. So we don't know what proportion of the people from Scotland actually do descend from Israelites, but it could be very many, a very instrumental and determinative factor descended from Israelites. They may claim the title of the tribe of Manasseh, of having done what Manasseh was supposed to do, was predicted to do. But together with this, we have a problem that some of them are not a small proportion of them have prejudices against the Jews and against the state of Israel. And this is a problem of theirs that tells against them. May the Lord Almighty help us and guide us and let us know the truth and know how to deal with the reality, whether for the better or for the worse, that we are sometimes faced with. Thank you. May the Lord God of Israel bless you.